My name's Caroline Gudge, or Kaz Gudge is what most people know me as, and today I'm just talking about my MS patient journey. The reason I'm passionate about talking about this is that it's something that's encompassed my entire life. Before the diagnosis, I was relatively active. I actually had no medical issues at all my entire life. I'll touch wood on that one. And then the trigger to my initial workup was actually a patch of my right thigh went numb. So when I was showering, I couldn't actually feel the water hitting it, which I thought was unusual at the time. And luckily for my journey, I had really brilliant backup from our GP service. So I was actually sent to our local hospital for investigation. And that was actually the start of this whole journey. So in 2015, I had that initial workup, but was told that because things seemed like they were relatively slowly moving forward, just to go away and live my life, which I did for 2 years, got married to my lovely husband, Chris. And in 2018, I had a little girl called Brooke, my pride and joy. So I actually met Tanya when Brooke was about 6 weeks old after my first relapse, which was a big deal to me at the time, but was relatively mild if I'd have known what was coming in the future. But for me, being able to meet Tanya was a massive key point now looking back in my recovery, because, oh, for goodness sake, I'm going to start crying already. Speaking to a woman who'd had a baby and understood why I wanted to breastfeed so badly. You were my physio mum, you understood what I was going through. And actually, you did. You went straight into the research on when I could do steroids and when I could breastfeed and when I could do everything. And at the beginning, which seemed like it was so huge, I had this positive thing that I could still focus on.
I think you looked at both bits that were important. And for you, being able to do stuff that no one else could do with Brooke was really significant, wasn't it?
Yeah. And actually, that's a factor that does need to go into the patient journey, because for another person, that wouldn't have been relevant. Whereas for me, that was such a key part of my recovery. I had this initial attitude of fighting my diagnosis or fighting this MS thing, and it is so invisible.
I think the coping strategy of feeling that you have to fight it almost is one that concerns me, because fighting MS isn't going to be your win. Working out how you manage your MS and what you can do is your win, and that's the difference.
Yeah, it's changing the goalposts.
Yeah, it is.
The support system that you have access to is a huge factor in your recovery. And yeah, my friends and family, and now would include the NHS staff that I've dealt with. Hydro was one of the best things for my rehab. I felt the strongest, not straight after. That's probably the weakest I'd felt. But yeah, the walking stick was a big change because I'd got that independence. And actually I was able to lift Brooke in the carrier because I could use it. She was in her car seat carrier, but I could move it along, so I could actually get us to the door for like hydro appointments and stuff when I was picked up. In April, when Brooke was 6 months old, after doing all this rehab and having had the steroids previously, and I'd actually gotten to a really good point. In fact, I'd done my hydro course with you. I'd done a few weeks of that. And then, yeah, like I say, just went to bed one night, was struggling a bit to get up the stairs, and woke up in the night needing to go to the toilet, and my right leg just crossed over my left leg and I just fell on the floor. And yeah, and I didn't walk again for sort of 6 months. And that was the start of being in the wheelchair. Which was a huge thing for me to accept at the time. And all I wanted to know from them was when I was going to walk again. And I also put questions on you that were too hard, really.
I think you asked questions that most people ask, but I think it's really important that we're always honest that we don't know what the future is. But what we work on is the immediate here and now and the building blocks. And we've talked about how you give someone hope, but also don't promise the earth.
No.
Yeah, and I was also happy to hear any information a lot sooner.
You very much were. You
Yeah.
wanted to know lots more information earlier than Kaz, but I think that was important to be able to have different conversation with you compared to Kaz, but it's how you have that conversation, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is probably one of the things I find the hardest from looking back. We were told just to go away and get pregnant because actually while you're pregnant, your chance of relapse is really low because it lowers your immune system. So actually I remembered skipping out of there. I was on steroids. With this hope for the future and excitement that it was all going to be okay. And I think part of the journey now does have to be how high are the chances of a postnatal relapse. I remember having a conversation with Chris in between saying, did he definitely still want to marry me? Because I didn't know what was going to be there in the future. I had to fight for myself, but equally for Brooke. She was I just brought this child into the world and I almost felt guilty. I felt guilty that I did because I didn't feel like I should have had her if I didn't feel like I could have looked after her. But in all fairness, looking back, I had no idea. I just thought I'd have to be on steroids and then I would bounce back.
But you have looked after her, you have managed her, you've got an amazing relationship with her. You've done it in a different way to someone that hasn't got MS.
No. I'd say probably my worst moment was we were taking Brooke up to bed. Well, we went to have a bath and Chris came up and I struggled to get up the stairs to go into the bathroom. And I said to him, should I just go now? So that Brooke doesn't remember me. And I sort of saw the impact in Chris's face of asking that question. And I've said to you now, looking back, I wouldn't swap that for the world. At the time, it frustrates me that I thought me physically not being strong, I never really use this word, or being disabled, meant that I couldn't support Brooke or be there for Chris. I had no idea what the future was going to hold. But you make it. It is actually what you make it, which is why I'm so passionate about the hope thing, because it is up to you how you decide to paint things. When we first had to have equipment in the house. So for me, it started with the occupational therapist wanted to put some handles and rails into the house. And for me at the time, that was the worst thing I wanted. And then it felt like so much was thrown at us with needing a stair lift for outside, which I panicked about for ages and then got and changed my life. But we also had the point that you sort of almost not pushed, but you encouraged us to get the hospital bed because I was sleeping on the sofa. And that bit, looking back, without that, it would have been a much harder journey. I emailed you, I think, at one point and said you've turned my house into a hospital room.
I think the balance is making you safe, knowing we can give equipment to make it easier, but actually hearing it back and sending a picture to say, this is what you've done to my house, was actually something I think sometimes we should stop and realise the impact that it has. It might make it safer, it might make it easier, but what does it do for someone's home that's their private space? You agreed to the stair lift outside the house, but not up the stairs inside the house.
So I have always been quite stubborn in saying that I wanted the outstairs one because for safety there's no handrails and it's a shared stairwell. But inside we decided that once I could do the stairs, rather than putting a stair lift in, I was going to put a rail on the other side so that I could walk up myself. So sometimes that's harder. When I've been ill recently or catch a cold or whatever, I do sleep on the sofa again. So it is something that you have to, it's a balance of what you think is important at the time. So yeah, adaptations are a big deal, and equally the cost of it. So we've had our bathroom redone, and I didn't want, the age as we are with a young child, I didn't want the house to be a white plastic, I don't know if this is the right term, but disabled bathroom. I didn't want it to look like something that wasn't ours and our style. And on the one day Lynn was stood near me and I said, I've just lifted my leg. And then she was like, what? And I lifted my leg, but because I was so excited, I'd put even more effort in and I almost kicked her on the top. So we both ended up bursting out laughing. So I was like, I didn't even know I could do that. I'm so grateful for my wheelchair. And that is something that I never thought we would be discussing 4 years down the line. At the time, that was the biggest, you can't possibly be in a wheelchair. That was almost, and actually in the media and even some professionals, it's like, not everyone's in a wheelchair, and it's not an end point, it's not a failure. It's not this fear-mongering thing. You can still have this amazing, colourful life from a wheelchair, but actually, heaven forbid, now looking back, if I didn't have a wheelchair, I wouldn't be able to do anything. I'm back in work, I look after my daughter, I take her to ballet class on a Saturday in my mobility scooter. We've got all these things that have opened up because of being in a wheelchair, and actually it's not fair on people in a wheelchair to make it seem like it's anything other than just an aid. I used to use Brooks Pram. That was my first mobility aid. That was socially acceptable, so it didn't worry me. Making that jump, I remember having the conversation with Chris and with Tanya, we borrowed a wheelchair from Chris's auntie, and would you like to just try the wheelchair? And I was so stubborn, and I was so scared of getting in this wheelchair. But we went to the first wedding, and I said to you, I struggled with people seeing me in a wheelchair, which is, now looking back, I'm so annoyed that I thought that. But
you weren't going to go to that wedding, were you?
No. And I remembered messaging, and I remember thinking, please just respond saying that it's not accessible, so that I didn't have to go.
Do you remember the pictures you sent me? They were the most amazing pictures of you having a fantastic time with all your mates at a wedding.
And those are good memories now, and that wedding is actually very special.
It is life-changing when it's more severe and it stops you doing what you'd have done as a couple 5 years ago, and the things that you just take for granted, they change. So yes, we go out together, but we don't go out for a walk together. That dynamic is shifted. Daft things, you sort of walk past each other in a house and you might hug each other. Actually, even that is really different.
Yeah.
Because the dynamics of it are changed.
This was just reaffirmed the whole time on holiday. So the first time I was so excited to get into the pool. And then we got there and I suddenly thought, I'm going to have to get in and out of the pool with everybody watching. And then I just thought, no, I'm not going to do it. So I said, actually, don't worry about it, I'm just going to watch. And Chris was like, you've been excited about getting in the pool the whole time. And he's like, it won't be the worst. It's not as bad as you think. Let's just get on with it. So then I got to getting out. I was like, oh, crikey, here we go. So I was like, Chris lifted me up. I used the arms of the thing, so he climbed back in and helped me get back onto the chair. And I was so relieved I was there. And the lifeguard starts coming towards us. And I was like, oh no, he's going to tell me I'm not allowed to swim. Because I can't save myself. And he said, in future, I'll help you get in and out of the thing. He was like, you just wave at me and I'll come through. Any dad that was anywhere near us, the second Chris got the wheelchair, it was like, he almost waved at the lifeguard, like, no, I've got it this time. I guess I'm proud of where we've got to in the 4 years.
I think you've got to a really good place, actually.
I came across a poem that I saw on Instagram the other day, and when I read it, I just feel like it resonated totally with my situation. And I think for everyone with MS, there was never a day so misty and grey that the blue was not somewhere above it. There is never a mountaintop so bleak that some little flower does not love it. There was never a night so dreary and dark that the stars were not somewhere shining. There is never a cloud so heavy and black that it's not a silver lining.